Well, greetings and welcome to the University of Minnesota Cloquet Forestry Center. My name is Kyle Gill and I am the Forest Manager and Research Coordinator here at the Cloquet Forestry Center and at the other experimental forest lands across northern Minnesota. I'm here to give you a brief introduction to our CFI, or Continuous Forest Inventory Plot Network. You received, hopefully, the protocol from 2014, and I'm just going to kind of walk through that and give you an in-field summary of how that protocol was carried out back in 2014. The CFI plot network was initially put in the late 50s and early 60s, and it gets measured every 10 or so years. And the goal of the CFI network is to get an idea of the overall condition of the forest. We have about 3,400 acres here, and the roughly 400 plots that are part of the CFI are there to tell us, to give us a condition status. What's the forest types that we have? What's the age class? What's the diversity? Stuff like that. So there are 5 parts to the protocol. Part number 1 is to collect their materials and set the objectives, and then also to relocate the plots. So the crew was given a list of the plots and a general area, and at that point they had rough GPS points. One of the tasks in 2014 was to use a high accuracy GPS in order to then get a little bit more improved resolution on the plots. So once they got close to the plot center, they looked for a post. And at the post, on each post, this little 2x2 by 4 feet, I think, post, there's a plot number. So this is plot number 305. It's a little tough to see there probably in the video, but this is plot 305. And once they were at the plot center, in part 2, they needed to describe the plot area. And there's some clear ways to describe the plot area. The goal of that is to describe basically the overall condition of the plot and the surrounding forest that plot represents. The cover type, so the type of species, the general size of the trees, the density, physiographic conditions, and if there's any recent disturbances, either wind or logging or anything that might help describe that plot. So after part 2, then they go into individual tree data. You can see on these 2 trees over here that they are labeled with this white marking paint. So that means that these trees that we see here are inside the plot. There are 2 plot sizes. There's the main plot, which is a 1/7 acre plot. And that is about a 44.5 foot radius. So any tree that's above 4.95 inches diameter, that's within 44.5 feet of that plot center marker, is going to get a tree number, and it's going to be It's going to be measured for diameter at breast height. It's going to get measured for live crown ratio. So of that, or it's total height and live crown ratio. So of that total height, how much of it is in live crown? So looking at that white pine there, rough estimate would be that about 50% of it has a live crown. So anything that helps describe those individual trees would be collected on that main plot, so the 1/7 acre plot, for any tree above 4.95 inches. And then at the subplot, which is a 1/100th acre plot, 11.78 feet radius. These are all the trees that fall under the 4.95 inch diameter class, but are still above 0.95 inches. So this balsam fir here falls into that category. It was given tree number 93, it looks like. A unique ID per plot. Each tree gets a unique ID number. So the same thing would be data are collected for those trees on the smaller subplot. The other thing that I didn't mention on these trees is the first thing they measure is whether or not it's live or dead. So all dead trees were counted as part of this survey as well, in order to get an idea of what the standing coarse woody debris condition was on the forest. And species and kind of what you would expect if you're trying to get an idea of what is going on in the tree layer. There's a good amount of information that you collect. So part 4 of the sample in 2014 was to sample the downed coarse woody debris. This was a new part of the protocol in 2014, and I haven't seen any reports that came out of those data. But they used, they only did this on what are called random starts 1 and 2. So each of these plots, the plot network is set up in a randomized systematic plot network. So they had a random start, and then roughly 100 plots per random start were established in a systematic way. So the random start basically means that it was randomly generated where on the forest that systematic network would start. This one being plot number 305 was in random start group number 3. So this would not have had coarse woody debris sampled on it. But if it had, a pretty standard line intercept transect, that is a protocol that is published about in Brown 1976, I think it is, was used, just one 35-foot long transect following the Brown's transect plot or technique, not plot technique, but sampling technique. One of those transects was done per plot where it was where those plots were established, or where the protocol called for. And then the 5th part, I think they did that once they got back to the office. They took the data that they collected for the day and entered it back into the database. So there's an access database that's available through the University of Minnesota library system that has all of these data from across the now nearly 60 years that that this plot network has been in place. So that's a brief introduction into the CFI plot network here at the CFC. And if you have any questions, reach out.